You're listening to the winning literary show, Off the Shelf Books Talk Radio, live with host Denise Turney, author of the books Long Walk Up, Portia, Love Pour Over Me, Spiral, Love Has Many Faces, and Rosetta's Great Hope. Turn up your dial and get ready for a blast of feature author interviews, 411 on book festivals, writing conferences, and so much more. Ready? Let's go.
Good morning out there in Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, Rainbow Soul, wherever you are catching Off the Shelf. And if this is your first time tuning in Off the Shelf on this glorious Saturday morning, I want to tell you that you absolutely are listening to the winning literary radio show, Off the Shelf. You at the right spot. Welcome to this Saturday. You guys are in the middle of May. It's May the 16th already. I want to ask you, for our listeners, I hope you have your copy. Those who do, you know what I'm talking about. And those who don't, I hope you go out and get a copy. But how good of a mystery sleuth are you? I love suspense. I actually was watching a suspense movie, but it was kind of with a little too much a horror thriller in it for me. But those suspense, they keep you so tight. You just sitting waiting for the next thing to happen. And sometimes you want to figure out what's going to happen before it's revealed in the movie, the play, in the book, etc. Well, if you're one of those people who love suspense, you love a good mystery, but you also value relationships. You don't want to just a mystery where it's just so much violence. You love relationships. There is a soulmate relationship in this book, Love Pour Over Me, with Raymond and Brenda. They meet in college. There's also a complicated father and son relationship in the story. Raymond's father has untreated alcoholism, but he raised him by himself. So he loves his son. If you can see how these relationships not only change over time, as all our relationships do, but how they change the people involved in the relationship and even the people witnessing what's happening in the relationship. If you value friendships, I'm telling you guys, there are 5 friendships. These 5 guys meet in college. One of them goes on to play in the NFL. Raymond's on his way to the Olympics. They are doing fabulously in sports, academically, in the community, but there's this murder mystery, and who's involved in this mystery? If you like a good mystery and you value relationships, I really would encourage you to stop what you're doing. You can go over to Walmart, you can go over to Amazon, you can go over to Barnes & Noble, you can go over to eBook It, etc., and get a copy of Love Pour Over Me. If you want a print copy, you can also get a print copy because it's in print or ebook form. I wouldn't wait if I was you to enjoy this good story. Get a copy of Love Pour Over Me by Denise Turney today. Next, we have an awesome author on deck for you this morning. But before we introduce her, I want to leave this thought with you by Bob Marley. Open your eyes. Look within. Are you satisfied with the life you're living? Open your eyes. Look within. Are you satisfied with the life you're living? And now, let us go and meet our very special off-the-shelf guest. And a special off-the-shelf guest this morning is Judith Welsh. Now, Judith is a retired clinical social worker, you guys. I'm sure she knows a whole lot about people. Post-retirement, she spent months reading. And during her reading days, she learned about the Grand Duchess Tatiana of Russia, and thanks to Judith being on Off the Shelf, I learned a little bit about the Grand Duchess Tatiana of Russia, and she is a daughter of Russia's last monarch. The Grand Duchess is thought to have been domineering and maternal in her personality, and our Off the Shelf guest this morning, Judith Welsh, is we're going to talk about this Grand Duchess, but even more about Miss Judith. She is also a wife, a pet lover, and the author of the books Last Waltz and All of Me. We are absolutely honored to have Judith join us on Off the Shelf Book Talk Radio this morning. Welcome to Off the Shelf, Judith.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Denise.
We are delighted to have you with us. Now, the first few questions I'm going to ask you, Judith, I ask all our guests, and I ask I guess the same question, so our listeners can get a little familiar with our guests before we jump right in and start talking about their books. So to kick it off, Judith, could you please tell off-the-shelf listeners where you grew up and what life was like for you growing up?
Well, I grew up outside of Boston, and being from outside of Boston, a little north of Boston, most of my growing up years were, steeped in history about the Revolution and what happened. But I grew up at that point was a small town, and it was idyllic. I mean, everybody knew everybody else. We used to ride horseback, and I mean, we just had a good group of friends and a good group of neighbors, and it was idyllic, to say the least.
So are you like the only child in your family, or do you have siblings?
Oh, no, I have two sisters, one older and one younger, and I know what it's like to be in the middle. And my father was an executive and went on to become a very well-known executive, and he made, he left his job of 25 years and then went and started his own company, which is still going
good for
today.
Him.
Yeah, which is still going
good
today.
Good for him.
And my mother, she was a lovely woman, and she was very active. And
now, as a child, what did you, Judith, when you were a kid? When we were kids, we decide what do I want to be? I've heard interviews with actors and different people in arts and some people in business, and they knew right away. They knew what they wanted to be when they were a kid, and some of them actually became what they wanted to be, and some of them didn't. Their life went totally opposite of what they thought. When you were a kid, what did you want to be? What did you dream of being when you grew up, when you were a little girl?
Oh, I dreamed of many things. I dreamed of being a cowboy.
Okay.
And I dreamed of becoming an actress until I realized I stank at it. But mainly I was interested in history, and I toyed with the idea of archaeology, and then as life goes on, you totally take off in a different direction, and which I did, and I got my degree in sociology, and I worked in the mental health field for a couple of years after that before I decided, to get married, and then we went off in another direction, and I decided to become a clinical social worker. And
what drew you to that field? And then I want to ask you how that work has impacted your writing, because I have two friends who actually they were in social workers for over 20 years, and they said after a while that work can be so stressful. You go into it to help people, but then you've seen, like, I think there was a doctor who it really impacted her, and you hear people, nurses on the front lines with COVID-19. You want to help people, but when you keep seeing so much need, it can start to feel overwhelming, even as a person who just wants to help people. But what drew you into that particular field?
Well, after I got out of junior college, because, again, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I started working at an institution for developmentally delayed individuals right at the start of deinstitutionalization. And I was there for a couple of years in trying to get people to understand that these individuals weren't below us. I mean, some of them I found to be very intelligent, in others, in mainly where I was, it was like a dumping ground for kids, for parents who couldn't afford their kids.
Wow.
And, you know, that got to be grueling for me, so I left and, you know, bounced around for a while, and then I came up here to New Hampshire and settled down, and that's when I decided I wanted to be a clinical social worker. So I could help.
And that's kind of sad that kids end up in these programs because their parents just figure, I don't have the money to raise my child, so go out and to a young person, go out in this big world and you figure it out on your own. Sorry, I gave birth to you. I can't take care of you, so you go figure it out on your own. And then you see these. That is really, 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 really sad. And we do have a lot of nets out to try to catch that, but it comes down to each individual as well. But people who worked in social work tell me the need is so enormous. And if you just walk through your city, your town, you don't see it. You don't see it. So things look okay to you, but they say, oh, my God, the need is in every town is overwhelming. I don't care how good you think your city is. It's just overwhelming, the need. It's just hidden. It's just hidden. Now, how many years did you serve as a clinical social worker, Judith, and what top 3 things did you learn about people that strengthens your writing today?
Well, I was a clinical social worker for just about a little over 20 years.
Bless you.
And, I mean, what I learned about people that helps me today is just the resiliency of them. I mean, people, we are a resilient people. And we each have to, you know, come up with different ways, but we do it. And it's amazing to me when people really figure out, okay, this is what I have to do, and then strive for it. I mean, the other thing is that, you know, people aren't broken. They just need to have a place where they can come in and figure out things and understand where they need to go. And I think the most important thing is that, you know, it's incredible. It's an incredible feeling when you see one of your individuals just blossom, and you know, you had a small part of that, and that's what kept me going for a number of years. But as your friends say, it's a grueling job. And at the end, it will end up consuming you. And that's what happened to me. And that's when I had a doctor who was treating me at the time just look at me and say, you got 2 choices. You either retire or die. So I chose retirement.
Yeah, smart for you, you know, and I thank you for the work you did. Just like, again, people talk about the people on the front lines of COVID. They may not want to go out there. They know, and they could get sick and pass away. But the need to care for others is so strong in them that they keep going out there. I just hope that we appreciate, not just for now, but that we just keep appreciating, even when the COVID-19 is over, what these people are given, not just the medical, but therapists, counselors who are working with people. I just hope that we continue to appreciate it. So that's it. Thank you for your social work. I know you probably impacted so many people's lives, and I thank you for that. Now, you took time to read. You retired. You took time to read and strengthen your health after you retired. Had you set out, Judith, to read about the Grand Duchess Tatiana of Russia? If not, how did you learn about her? Because you're going way back. We're going back during the very earliest of the 19th, 20th century. How did you set out to study about her? If not, how did you stumble upon the Grand Duchess?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I've always had been interested in history and in Russian history. I mean, in high school when I don't know whether they do it now. I had to write a history thesis over a year in my senior year, and we had just finished studying Catherine the Great, so I wrote a history paper on her, and she was a Romanov. She was married to Peter, who was a Romanov, and I mean, she was an amazing woman, again, and she was very progressive and did things today that did things back then that she needs to be admired about. And when I retired, I was reading a book. I don't even remember the book I was reading, and I typed in. I was looking for something about what the writer had said, and I typed in, and of course, and I don't know what happened, but there she popped up at me, and I just looked at her and I said, I know her, and so I clicked on her, and up she came, and I had always, we'd always been taught that the Tsar and his family never cared about their countrymen and just danced their lives away. And when I started reading about her, it was like, good heavens, she wasn't, she was never like none of them were like what we've been told for the past 100 years.
Wow,
and so, yeah, go.
No, go ahead.
And so
There's always
I looked at it and I said, I'm going to sit down and start writing about her. And I never had any intention of having, getting the book published. And, then a very good friend of mine read it, and I gave her a copy of some of the chapters I had written, and she said, yeah, this is good. You need to get this published. And that's where it all began.
So just simple curiosity, and then it turns into a novel that we're going to talk about even further on today's show. I'd never even heard of it. I never even heard. I mean, there would really be no reason to, because we're going back so far back in time. But I was fascinated when I started to read about her and see the pictures of her. But so can you give off-the-shelf listeners an overview of your book, The Last Waltz?
Oh, what it basically is about is a fictional novel that I wrote around Grand Duchess Tatiana and her family. And it's about the different things that she did, and they all did. I mean, Grand Duchess Tatiana, her mother, Alexandra, and Olga were surgical nurses and became surgical nurses when the war broke out in Europe. And they're not, and I realize, and again, I'm trying to get how intelligent she was, and they all were. I mean, these were beautiful, intelligent, highly educated women and spoke several different languages fluently, and had such different interests, but basically, I mean, they did things that normal monarchs at the time didn't do, like become working managers of different charities and raising money for them. I mean, Grand Duchess Tatiana, at the age of 18, became the president of the Russian Red Cross. So I wanted to get all of that out and to put her voice out and to have people understand that this family was not just a footnote in history. They lived it, and it's not to say they didn't make mistakes, because they did. And so what I'm doing is, in my book, is just an overview, is showing how intelligent and how diligent and resilient they were. And I threw it through the eyes of a man who I call Mikhail Malamar. But actually there was a Dmitry Malamar who was very active as a member.
I have to ask you this. How closely are what happens in the book, The Last Waltz, to real, actual historic events?
Oh, it works very closely. There was famine, disease and war going on. There were different things that happened with the royal family, with the imperial family, that they did. I mean, not just running what they call is committees, but also different things. I mean, they traveled around Russia constantly, raising money for the War Relief Fund, for the refugees, and for the members of the military and their families who had either been lost or, were so wounded they couldn't serve anymore. But the other thing is that they were going around the country, not only doing this, but interacting with people who had been through what it was like to be a refugee. And it was during that time in Russia, excuse me, there was a tremendous food shortage. And, Nicholas, during that time, during the first year of the war, had actually traveled to Moscow to pray at St. Basil's Cathedral, asking for help in getting through the war and winning the war. And they also went to other sites. I mean, it's just amazing, And Alexander, I mean, it really happened to her that people despised her, and she had a very, very few friends at the Russian court. And
now, this story opens in 1970, so we're talking. This isn't that far back.
No, actually, it opens in 1996.
But the actual events, I mean, go back. So, is that when the story in the novel? So, 1996. Is that when the story takes place, the bulk of it, or do you actually go back in time in the story?
Oh no, I go back in time. When the story opens in 1990, in 1996 is when they were able to prove that they had found the imperial family's remains just outside of Yekaterinburg, Russia, and they did use not only DNA samples from different Romanovs that are still alive today, but Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth's husband, who was the grandson of Princess Victoria, who was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria. And that's where they were able to trace the DNA back up through that to realize that, this was the imperial family, and this is, these are their remains. And so I start out in 1996 talking about that, but then after I think in the first chapter. That's when I fade out of 1996, and I have my protagonist Mikhail Malamar, tell the story and start telling her story to his grandson, who is next in line for the throne.
Now, can you introduce us to some of these the main characters in the Last Waltz? What are they like? What are their personalities like? Are any of them really ambitious, or some of them more submissive, or what are their personalities like? And the Grand Duchess, she makes an appearance.
Well, she's actually part. She's also a protagonist. I mean, what I did is I had Mikhail had always been since he saw her, he had always been in love with her. And in the book, what I do is I bring them together again, and they go through. And they're both very strong personalities. And he is a strong personality, but he's more of a thinker. And he tries to think things through and do the right thing. And where I have her in the beginning as being not impulsive, but she's set in a direction, and as in the real Grand Duchess, she had a love of medicine, and she was a good surgical nurse, and she strived for that. But she also knew her other duties as Grand Duchess, and she carried those out too. And so I have her doing that, but I have her being a little bit, because when reading about her, she is at times anxious. So I have the anxiety in her. Mikhail's brother Dmitri is a rogue. There's nothing more about it. He's just a rogue, but he's a lovable rogue, and he impacts. And then I have the three other Grand Duchesses in Alexei and their interactions. I mean, and I try and get as close to them as I can in writing about them. I mean, they all had strong personalities. I mean, Olga was interested in archaeology and politics, and she read every paper she could get her newspaper she could get her hands on, and she was a great. She became a great conversationalist, and loved nothing better than to have a debate.
Now, I certainly don't want to give this. Oh, go ahead.
And Anastasia is, of course, Anastasia, who was constantly playing practical jokes, and then you have Maria, who was the angel of the crowd. And in fact, Nicholas once said when she got into trouble, thank God she got into trouble. I was really thinking she was an angel. And then you have Alexei, who is the least known, but I have him learning to become Tsar, and I have him. He's intelligent, and I have him thinking things through, but he always acquiesced to his father.
Now, I don't want to give the story away, so I'm kind of on the fence on asking this question, but anybody who does the research on the Grand Duchess of Tatiana, if you Google it or do a search engine search, she was a real person, even though the book is itself a novel, but Judith Welsh, who we're interviewing here on Off the Shelf, she's very close. There are a lot of real-life events that occurred that are in the book. But why was the royal family murdered, including the Grand Duchess? And when I did my research on her, I got to tell you, I liked her. She was, even back during the time when They actually were here on. She just was. She kind of put me in a way, a little bit of Princess Diana. She had her own mind. She seemed independent. She wasn't somebody who you were going to tell what to do. So when I researched her, I found myself like, I could like this person. But why was her family murdered, including the Grand Duchess Tatiana?
Oh, I have no worry about, it doesn't give anything away in the book. Because that was when I first started writing about writing the book. That was one of the things that was more to my main interest. Why did they murder him? Especially in a time where it was totally inappropriate to murder women and children, which they did. And I think and I do talk about it in all of me where I first start going into it. While I was researching for the book, I noticed, I wondered about, what would happen if Alexei had succumbed to his hemophilia before he had any children. And so I'm like going through, okay, how do I find this out? And then I read about what they call is Pauline law in the Russian Orthodox Church, or in the Eastern Orthodox religion, as it's referred to now. And I actually found the law, and it said at the very end, if the Tsar dies without issue, then the oldest daughter without a male heir, then the oldest daughter becomes empress. And it was like, that was an aha moment for me, because I knew from different documentaries in looking into Stalin's life, I knew that he had started to be between the ages of 16 and 18. Hang on a minute. He was studying at a seminary before he got kicked out for his anger issues. And what do they do in the first couple of years of the seminary? They study Orthodox law. Excuse me. So he actually knew. He had to have known that law existed. And so I think that he was the one. I don't think it was Vladimir Lenin, but I think it was actually, he was the one that secretly ordered them all executed, because he knew that had any one of them gotten out, they could have rallied an army up and probably, won the revolution as a living banner. So,
Oh, my God. I have to ask you. We've had a couple of guests on Off the Shelf over the years, and this is something that these books, people don't realize how fascinated the people are with historical fiction, and it sells well. And most historical fiction, the authors don't just take so much freedom with the story that they don't tie it to actual events. Like, just listening to you here on Off the Shelf, it's obvious that you did your research. And this is something where I'll interview authors who've written historical fiction. They're very, very popular. It's that they say the readers, they know stuff to the finite detail. And you wouldn't think some people would know this, but I interviewed, we had one author on Off the Shelf, and she said she did so much research because readers would come to her and say things like, they didn't have those types of napkins back then, or they didn't serve that kind of food in that cafe. And the kind of stuff most readers don't pay attention to, but somebody who's really into historical fiction, I mean, the smallest detail, they're cued in on it. So that said, how much research, Judith, I can just imagine, how much research did you do while you were compiling material for The Last Waltz?
I actually, first of all, I love historic fiction. I mean, I love it. But I actually started writing, and then, I'd come to a place and I would think and go, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. And then I'd go and research it, and then come back and rewrite it. And then, every time I would do research, there would be another spider web that I would have to follow. And when writing about this, I always made it a point that I would write it, and then I would go and find out, what was happening back then. I mean, I would, inadvertently I would write about a type of food, and it was like, did they have that type of food back then? Of course, then I'd go back and I research and I go, oh, okay, they did. In the second book, I introduced a child protagonist who loves peanut butter. And before I had her loving peanut butter, I followed the lead and said, okay, when was peanut butter introduced? And and then, yep, I can use peanut butter. This is when this was happening. Okay. And, and other things. I mean, I try to get it down to the last detail. Sometimes I found it, and other times I didn't, and I just had to take a leap of faith.
Yeah, there are readers out there. There's always a reader, and it's funny, as an author, even I don't write historical fiction, but when I do write novels, whatever city I set the characters in, I do my research and research, because the last thing you want is for somebody to tell you, that's not in that city, or they didn't wear those type of clothes back then. So you do as you're writing, you got to make sure if you introduce food, was this food around then, and make sure, because there is a reader out there who will tell you back in 17 whatever, because of their own study, and they didn't have that. So and then your story might lose some credibility. So you do have to find yourself. But with historical fiction, there's a ton of it. Had you always intended on making the story a series, Judith?
No. I mean, it's just like I sat down and started writing, and I'm still going. And it's to me, it's just been a great adventure, and I've learned so much. I never intended it to go as long as it did, but I just, because of the intricate detail that you have to pay, things go from being 1 to 3 pages. I know that in writing the first 2 books, I probably broke every fictional writer guideline that's ever, and I, it sometimes I draw out something that maybe should be told in a page. I mean, it is a big book, and my editor, Josh Hoops, of Hoops Editing, and I have now got a very good working relationship, and, we've decided that in the future, at some point, we're going to go back and revisit both first 2 books and probably revise them and, make them a little bit clearer. But
what have readers been saying about The Last Waltz?
Oh, some people have said it's interesting. A lot of people that I know around here that I've given copies to have said that they loved it. I have one who one person who just finished All of Me, and is who was a technical writer for people professors and scientists at MIT. She said she's been enthralled. She was enthralled by it and is now waiting for the next book to come out.
But that's good feedback. Now, how soon after you published The Last Waltz did you start writing on All of Me?
Well, no, actually, the big things that happened for me is that it was a huge book. That I actually split it into 2 different books, and we should have split it into 3 different books.
Wow.
But and that's why at the end of Last Waltz I kind of drop off, and then in All of Me I pick it up. So it's the first book is like a build up to their marriage, and the second book is their subsequent marriage, and their feelings and what's going on around them.
So what's happening in Miss Tatiana's life? How old is she at the start of All of Me? Are they already married when the book opens?
No. She's. I opened it up in 1916, so she was 18. She was 7. She was just barely 18, and then I bring it up when she marries. She's 19, and because and I have her married in 1917, just before the summer before the Revolution. She's married in June in 1917 is when the first revolution started, where they were arrested.
Now, how long have Tatiana and Mikhail been in love before they married?
Well, he has always been in love with her from the first day he saw her. He's part of her regiment. She was given a regiment at the age of 14, and her sister was also, Olga was also. And so they always had an interest in the regiments, and they would review the troops quite often. And even when her regiment was up at the front, Tatiana always kept an interest and wrote them and urged them on when they were at the front. And so what I do is when she's 14, she notices it, because I have him as a 4th lieutenant sitting in the first day of formation for him next to his brother Dmitri, and he catches sight of her as she's coming down the line, and he holds his breath and starts turning blue, and his brother has to lean over and say, "Knock it off, breathe." And she sees him turning blue, and she keeps looking back at him. And then when they meet again, of course the flame is still there. And then he gets permission from the Tsar to court her, and which he does. And then in the second book they marry. And it was a fun book. I loved reading about Russian weddings back then because it was amazing what they did. They like to party more.
Oh, a huge extravaganza.
Oh yeah.
Now when I was researching for your interview, this is another thing. I really liked Tatiana. There was something about her I really liked, but this also stood out to me. So could you please tell us about the 5-year-old girl who Tatiana and Mikhail befriend? Oh,
Raquel. Again, again, she's not. She is just a fun character that I came up with, and she's a very intricate. She becomes a very intricate part of their lives, and she is when they first meet her at a refugee camp, she's 5 years old, and she's had a very rough life. When she was born, it was idyllic, and then the war came, and her family farm was burnt to the ground, and her mother was viciously raped. And so when she and her grandparents leave their home, she has witnessed all of this at the tender age of 5. And this is where I bring my clinical point of view into focus, because I noticed when I was doing my research on Alexandra, I realized that she suffered from PTSD and depression. And so I wanted to start bringing that into the book. And so Raquel was kind of my venue to do that. And so, I got to love her so much that she stays with us. And,
okay.
And she becomes the glue that binds them together. And she just developed so interestingly that I just love her to death.
Now, how safe is it? When I was doing the research, it seemed like Tatiana and Mikhail weren't fully aware there's actually a war raging. Did it shift like that quickly, or were they insulated from it?
Well, they weren't. Like a lot of people say that the Grand Duchess were isolated in from everything, and they really weren't. In the first book, I don't bring up the war as much as I should have. But in the second book, it starts coming into focus with, the refugees and with what's going on around them. And I have them becoming more and more aware. And all the time, I have this mystery going on about this secret that is coming into focus. And it's I have them in the book that I'm have editing right now. I have them actually traveling to the front and having the war come more to them. I think it's in Last Waltz, I have him actually traveling. I have Mikhail actually traveling to the front lines when it was in Donetsk, and having him interact, and his father has been wounded gravely, and he wasn't expected to make it. So I have him going, and I have him coming across a German encampment, air squadron encampment, and I have him destroying that. And in how much people had suffered. Because it's not just about the war itself; it's about how the war impacts everybody.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you did your research, for the story. And you said you started writing, and you said, "Oh, let me go." But just listening to you, you seem to know quite a bit about the history. How would you say the events of what happened to the family have impacted or influenced Russia today?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, when they found the remains and they were able to identify them, Boris Yeltsin was also was president then, and it was interesting because he turned around and said, "No, we have to honor these people," and they had and they invited the Romanovs back in to Russia. And they had a huge ceremony interring them in the Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg. How it's impacted it today, you know, I know that every year around the time of their death, you know, the Eastern Orthodox Church made them what they call passion bearers, which which is basically a saint. Excuse me. And every year, on the night that they were from the night to the morning, because they don't know exactly when they were murdered, they go to the Petersburg Cathedral that's dedicated to them, and they. A lot of millions of Russians across Russia honor them, and they have, you know, and the priest leaves the Petersburg church, and they walk the 7 miles to where they were buried, and millions. In fact, once the communist regime had fallen. There's an interesting story that says that one of the Grand Dukes, who I introduce in the third book, who was a live person, who was involved with Rasputin's murder, actually had escaped Russia. He had a son. And the son, oddly enough, you know, after the Grand Duke's wife left him and moved because she was an American heiress, she moved to New York, moved back with the son, and his son later became, you know, he was a U.S. Marine. He fought in the Korean War. He ran a very profitable business, and when he retired, he became He became mayor of Palm Springs, California.
Wow.
And well, the interesting part is that during the chaos that happened when the communist regime fell, he had monarchists seek him out and literally asked him to become the next tsar. And after he finished laughing, he said, "Sorry, boys, I'm not ready to give up my day job yet."
Yeah.
And so that's how it impacts. I mean, and I think more and more, you know, people are starting to realize that these people weren't just a footnote in history. They were making history.
Wow.
And,
interesting. And you're helping to introduce them to so many people who might not have otherwise have learned about them. Now, we have just about 7 minutes left in today's show. I definitely want to talk a little bit about the book writing, in general, book writing and book marketing, but I definitely want to ask you this as a writer. The fact that you worked for over 20 years as a clinical social worker, does that help you dig deeper into the makings of a character so you can help? Does it make it easier for you to develop a multidimensional character?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it did, and it was using historical figures. I was able to do the research and put forward, that them as a multifaceted, dimensional character, and that's what I tried for. And we each have our own quirks, and I tried to look at different people that I'd known throughout my life and put their particular quirk where it belonged. And as a mental health worker, I was able to look at it more through a clinical lens and helping to deal with it.
Because that is, I think, even more than the plot. Certainly, when you're dealing with historical fiction, the plot, you can create a plot twist, but you also have a lot of actual history that can serve as a really good foundation or a backdrop. But still, what readers love the most, if they don't care about the character, if they don't care, I don't care what happens to these characters. I don't care, like you were talking about the little 5-year-old that Mikhail and Tatiana meet, who you still adore. If they don't care about the character and they don't feel a connection, it's hard to keep a reader interested, whether you're writing a standalone book or a series book.
Yeah.
So that's why I would think that your clinical social work, you can dig a little deeper into the inner workings of the human mind and maybe make these characters that are so fascinating that people want to know what's going to happen next. What's going to happen next to Tatiana? What's going to happen next to Mikhail? Now, can you share 3 to 4 steps that you've found effective at getting the word out about your books, Judith?
Well, I went with Outskirts Press, and I can't say enough for them. They literally took me by the hand and led me through the process. And, I still work with them today, and we're working on a website right now that hopefully will be up by the end of the week. And, I have a marketing manager who just is a marvelous person, and she's put out feelers, and she's gotten people interested, and I can't say enough for her. And the whole team has just been so valuable to me, because I had no idea what was involved, and even today, I mean, I can't say enough that how much I've learned and how much I continue to learn. I mean, my editor has taken me by the hand and said, no, you don't do this. Here's what you need to do. And he sent me articles, and he's taught me, and he's made me read fictional writing books. And it's been valuable to me because I've learned so much, and I'm still enjoying it.
And that's a good thing. And I think we do continue to develop and sharpen our craft as artists, regardless of the art. Now, with just 2 minutes left in today's show, can you tell off-the-shelf listeners where they can get a copy of your books, The Last Waltz and All of Me?
Well, it's on, both are on Amazon, and they're both in ebook and in hardcover. You can go to Outskirts Press, and they have copies for sale. And it's also on Barnes & Nobles in ebook form.
Are you on any social media networks? If so, can you tell our listeners where they can find you on social media?
Right now, we're in the middle of doing my own website, and I'm also on Facebook. And I have it's under Last Waltz or All of Me, and both books will pop up. And I have a number of people that are interested and have they know that they can ask me questions, and I will answer them to the best of my ability.
Thank you so much. We have been so honored. I really enjoyed researching for today's show.
Yes.
I had no idea about this family till I started researching for Judith Welsh's, and I really, really liked Tatiana. I really liked her. And so we have had the pleasure of having Miss Judith Welsh with us. She is a retired clinical social worker, and thank you again for your service as a social worker. That is no easy job. And so after she retired, she spent months reading, and that's where she learned about the Grand Duchess Tatiana of Russia, a daughter of Russia's last monarch. And these historical stories are in her novels, The Last Waltz and All of Me, and encourage you to support Judith Welsh. And that website, she said she's hoping, or I would give you the URL, she said she's hoping it'll be ready by the end of this week or this coming week. So look forward to that. Thank you, Judith, and to each of our off-the-shelf listeners, those who tune in. There's so many ways people catch this show. So thank you for all that tune in. We get listeners from all over the world. And for those who came in midstream or late, you can, when the show finishes streaming, you can go back and listen to it in its entirety in the archives. As I always tell you guys, you are awesome. You are amazing. You are incredible. Go out and create a fabulous day for yourself. Thank you so much, Judith. I'll see you back here next Saturday, Off the Shelf listeners, at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Judith, I'll shoot you an email. Bye for now.
Thank you.